Talking about the features of Australian English, when compared to other English accents, Australian English is blended in with features of British English, Irish English, and American English. This can be explained through Australia's history. First of all, this period of the history of Australia, from 1788 to 1868, reveals how Britain has influenced the use of English in Australia. When British convicts and immigrants settled in Australia, they brought British English to Australia. Australians are much influenced by the British as they lived there for more than a century. On the other hand, Americanization is the process when features of North American English has entered Australian English. This process began in World War II, when the massive influx of US military personnel, such as importation of TV programs and other mass media content from the US. A more significant example would be the US computer software, Microsoft's spell checker, which changed the use of language in Australia. As a result, Australians use many British and American words interchangeably, such as pants and trousers, or lift and elevator, while they shun other words such as wildfire as too American, when a more Australian term bushfire is preferred. The Irish English features found in Australian English is rooted from the European immigration wave in 1947. Famine in Ireland, while gold rushes in Australia resulted in a large wave of Irish immigrants to Australia, especially Irish Catholic priests and nuns. They brought Irish English into Australian churches. Then Irish language features spread throughout Australia afterwards.
Australian English generally follows either British or American conventions. In terms of spellings, it adopts spellings from both varieties. This is exemplified by spelling colour with U like British uses, but spelling program with single M not followed by E. In terms of pronunciation, Australian English has several characteristics. Firstly, I is pronounced as oi in words like no and lo. The soft A is pronounced as e in cat. Australian English has also lost its rhoticity from Cockney, such as in car and better. Australian English has trap bath split. You hear a long vowel for bath but a short one for mouths. It has wide diphthongs, for example. Australian English adopts some vocabulary from both varieties. Like the British, they say mobile phone instead of cell phone, but they use the American word soccer instead of football. In addition, Australian English also has vocabulary outside the two varieties, such as footpath instead of pavement in UK and sidewalk in US. Australian slangs include amber, which means beer, and phrases like she's apple, that means it is fine. Previously, Australian English was divided into three main accents. Speakers of the accents differed on their social status. Cultivated accent was previously spoken by British officers and social elites. Here you may hear an example of cultivated accent, which was very common in broadcasting systems before the 1970s, whilst the general accent is mostly spoken in the metropolitan areas. Broad accent is most common in the rural areas. And the difference between the free accent is the increase in vowel duration and strength of front vowel racing from cultivated accent to broad accent. The cultivated accent has also fewer borrowed words from the criminals and sailors in the past, as speakers of the accent wanted to keep close to traditional RP instead of taking in flash language from the lower class.
English. I think the first factor to consider would be the influence of globalization. This includes how standardization of English language would be developed in the future. The use of English in other places will also affect Australians' language habits. Sydney is Australia's most ethnically and linguistically diverse city. Over one-third of people living in Sydney is speaking a non-English language at home. This is one of the influences of globalization. The second factor would be the culture and preferences of Australians. Their culture and preferences on where they'd like to travel their taste on choosing television shows would increase their exposure to the preferred culture and English accent. So they may tend to speak more similarly to the accent that they are often exposed to. Australians will also use slangs borrowed from other languages and cultures that they see on TV shows or social media. Teenagers may also imitate the accents of their favorite celebrities. The third factor is the influence of social classes. As mentioned, there are three varieties within Australian English: broad, general, and cultivated. A more preferred variety will develop more prominent features in the future Australian accent.
Now we're going to propose several future features of Australian English. Firstly, we believe that some elements of Australian English will still be prominent in the future Australian English. This is because such features mark the Australian identity of Australian English speakers. Speaking the English language with this accent bonds them socially. We particularly think that the general accent will be the norm, as with the increasing Australian nationalism since the independence of Australia, the British-oriented cultivated accent no longer gains social advantage, whilst the broad accent may symbolize republicanism and egalitarianism. It is on the other hand sometimes associated with awkerism and foreign migrants. Hence, it is likely that general accent, which is also uniquely Australian but lacks the negative connotations, becomes the standard accent. In terms of lexis, we think that Australian English will incorporate new words from other languages. This is because under globalization, metropolitan cities such as Sydney are highly multicultural. Tourism also brings speakers of all languages to Australia. These increased interactions with speakers of other languages will likely introduce their vocabulary to Australian English. Additionally, Australians also demonstrate increased internet usage in the digital age. They have ample access of YouTube and Facebook and can watch movies made from any country. This increases their exposure to other Englishes and also other languages. These may introduce new vocabulary such as slangs from text speak and phonetic changes of their accent. Similarly, because of the increasing interactions between Australian speakers and speakers across the world, it is likely that it may take in trends of other varieties. For example, despite when the rhotic Cockney variety of English was introduced back then, both Australian English and Cockney today are non-rhotic. There's probably some tendency in how our spoken language evolves. We suggest that Australian English may hence follow some of the trends of other varieties, which may be like yacht dropping and final cluster reduction, particularly with the increasing interaction between speakers of Englishes. To conclude, Australian English, like any other variety or language, is deeply connected with its history and geography. Social perception towards the language also plays a big role. For example, the changing perception towards speakers of cultivated Australian English has led to its rise and fall. Similarly, the independence of Australia, which has invoked a strong sense of identity, has led to increasing recognition of Australian English as a variety. Most importantly, language evolves to meet the needs of its users. Australian English has previously incorporated vocabulary from the indigenous tribes so as to name their unique cultural elements. Likewise, Australian English will likely incorporate internet slangs and foreign words as a result of the flow of information and people across the world. Although Australian English is anticipated to change, it is unlikely that the variety will disappear and totally merge into standard English. This is because Australian English signifies the identity of its speakers as well as their common history and culture. It is much more than a means of communication. Thank you. And here is our list of references. Thank you so much for listening.